In the dust-filled scrapyard of a forgotten war, a lone mechanic named Cale worked beneath the burning sun, his hands coated in oil and sweat. His breath steady but tired, each exhale carrying the scent of metal and smoke around him. The skeletons of war machines lay scattered, their rusted frames whispering stories of death and glory that no one remembered anymore. Cale had been fixing things for as long as he could remember. Yet nothing he repaired ever truly came back to life. They only moved because he forced them to, the gears grinding like broken hearts and the engines coughing out ghosts of their former fire. He dreamed of building something that would live, not just function, something that would breathe, think, and choose its own path. Each morning Cale woke before dawn to the sound of wind scraping across steel and sand. He lived in a small shack made from the body of an old tank, its hull patched with scavenged panels, the walls humming whenever the desert storms rolled through. He liked that sound. It reminded him that even dead machines could still sing if you listened close enough. When he stepped outside, the horizon was endless, the sky a pale gold sheet over the gray bones of forgotten giants, war drones, and armored walkers half buried and lifeless, stretching for miles. Like a metallic graveyard, Cale's hands were rough and scarred from years of welding, cutting and piecing together what others had thrown away. He spoke little, mostly to himself or to the machines as he worked, giving them names and small jokes, pretending they understood his loneliness. Sometimes he imagined them whispering back through the hum of power cells that flickered weakly beneath his touch. His favorite creation was a small mechanical bird that never managed to fly. It sat on his workbench, motionless, wings folded as if ashamed of its own failure. Yet Cale never scrapped it. He kept it there as a reminder that even the smallest dream deserved a second chance. Often wondered who started the war that left this place in ruins. The elders said it had been between nations that no longer existed. Their names erased, their flags turned to dust. But Cale did not care for politics. He only cared for purpose, and in the broken heart of the scrapyard he felt closer to it than anywhere else. He scavenged old memory chips, hoping to find messages from the past, recordings of laughter or songs that once filled human lives. All he found were fragments of battle, commands and screams that cut short. Still he listened to them every night, not out of horror but respect for the voices that had vanished into silence. When the sun reached its peak, he would stop working and sit under the shadow of a massive rusted war mech, its cockpit torn open like a wound. He would look at the sky and wonder if anything still lived beyond the horizon. Sometimes he thought he saw shapes moving in the heat waves, but they always vanished before he could be sure. Yet, deep inside, Cale knew that the desert was not empty, that something was waiting beyond the dunes, something that would change his life forever, though he could not name it, not yet. All he knew was that the world had grown too quiet, and somewhere in that silence, a new sound was about to rise. That night, the wind changed its song. It came low and heavy, as if dragging secrets through the dark. Cale sat by the dim blue glow of a half-broken lantern, its light flickering against the metal walls of his shack. He had spent the day repairing an engine core older than himself, and his body ached like the ground after thunder. He was about to sleep when he heard a sound that did not belong to the scrapyard. It was not the groan of steel or the sigh of shifting sand. It was alive, deep and trembling, like the growl of something breathing with fury and pain. He froze, listening. The sound came again. Closer now, echoing between the carcasses of war machines. Curiosity wrestled with fear inside him. Cale grabbed his torch and stepped outside. The desert night was cold, the stars sharp like shards of glass overhead, and the wind tasted of rust and electricity. He followed the sound through a maze of broken tanks and shattered drones, the ground crunching under his boots with every step. His heart hammered faster, each echo pulling him deeper into the graveyard, until he saw it. Buried under a collapsed transport lay a cage made of thick steel bars, twisted by time and heat. Within it something moved. Cale lifted his torch, and the light touched fur, black as smoke, and metal that gleamed beneath the dust. The creature inside was massive, its body a fusion of muscle and machine. One leg of gleaming alloy plates, one eye glowing faintly red, its chest rising with heavy breaths. It looked at him not with hunger but with something older, something that spoke of rage and exhaustion. Cale felt his throat tightened. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was not one of the standard war beasts the armies once used. This one was too refined to alive. The patterns on its metal limbs looked like symbols, not circuits. Like someone had built it with reverence, not cruelty. He stepped closer, and the beast let out a low warning growl that shook the air around him, but it did not strike. Cale raised his hands slowly, whispering words. He did not fully understand gentle words meant for calming engines and frightened animals alike. He circled the cage, noticing the locks fused by sand and time. The chains half melted into the ground. He could see wounds, old and new, along the creature's body. Dried blood mixed with rust where the metal joined the flesh. It had been there for years, maybe longer, forgotten by both sides of a war that cared for nothing but power. Kale felt something stir inside him, a strange sadness mixed with defiance. He could not walk away, not now, not after hearing that sound. He returned to his shack, gathered tools, a cutter, a wrench, a canister of old fuel, and came back to the cage. The beast watched every move, its single red eye glowing brighter with each spark. Kale worked in silence, sweat dripping from his brow, the air thick with heat and tension. Every cut he made released the scent of burned metal and freedom. He did not know why he was doing it, only that it felt right. When the final lock gave way, the door creaked open. The beast did not move, it simply stared at him, as if waiting for permission. Kale stepped back, breathing hard, his torch flickering. The creature slowly pushed forward through the broken gate, its claws sinking into the sand. It stood tall, stretching as the wind swept over it, and for one brief moment, Kale saw not a monster, but something magnificent. Then, without a sound, it turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving only footprints and silence behind. The morning came slow and red, the kind of sunrise that felt like it was bleeding across the horizon. Kale had not slept, his mind still haunted by the memory of the beast, its eyes, its silence, its impossible grace. He sat outside his shack, watching the empty dunes where it had disappeared, the sand shifting like an ocean under the wind. The desert had always been silent, but now it felt different, alive somehow, as if it too had noticed what had been set free. He kept expecting to see the creature again, maybe just a shadow on the ridge, or a flash of metal fur in the distance, but there was nothing, only the wind whispering across bones of steel and the buzz of the insects that survived. Where nothing else dared, Kale tried to work, but his thoughts drifted. Every sound made him turn his head, every gust of wind carried echoes of that low growl, until finally he gave up and stood staring into the wasteland, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. By midday, he found himself walking, without knowing why. The sun hung high and merciless above him, his boots sank into the hot sand, and each step brought him deeper into the forgotten world where machines slept half buried beneath dunes. He found strange tracks, clawed and heavy, pressed deep into the ground. They glowed faintly as if the sand still remembered the heat of the beast's passing. He followed them across the plain until they led him to a ravine he had never seen before. Down in the ravine, the air was cooler and smelled faintly of ozone. The walls were lined with shattered circuits and tangled cables like the veins of some ancient machine city. Kale climbed carefully down, his heart pounding. He could hear water somewhere ahead, a rare sound in the desert, and with it something else, faint, rhythmic, like breathing. He moved closer, hiding behind a broken piece of plating, and there it was, the beast lying near the pool, its body half submerged in the water, steam rising where metal met the surface. Kale watched it. For a long time it was beautiful in a way that defied reason, massive, and still glowing softly beneath the skin of armor plates. He could see faint scars, pulsing with dim light as if repairing themselves. The creature was healing. It turned its head, slightly, eyes opening to meet his gaze, and for a moment Kale forgot to breathe. He expected anger or threat, but instead saw recognition, as if the beast remembered. His hands, the touch that had freed Ith, stepped out from hiding, slowly, his movements careful, deliberate. The beast did not move, only watched him. Its red eye steady and calm. Kale spoke softly, his voice shaking, though he did not know what to say. Words spilled from him like a confession. You were not meant to die here. You were made for something more. The wind swept through the ravine, stirring dust and echoes. The beast rose, towering over him, yet it made no sound, its gaze deep and unreadable. Then it turned and began to walk away, disappearing again into the desert, leaving Kale standing by the pool, breathless, his reflection broken by ripples, and for the first time, he felt the desert breathe around him, as if the world had taken its first living breath in Betrius. The night fell heavy and quiet over the scrapyard. Kale returned from the ravine long after the sun's light had faded, his body trembling from exhaustion, and the strange pulse that still lingered in his veins. He could not stop thinking about the beast, the way it had looked at him, as if it carried some secret older than war itself. He tried to tell himself it was only an animal, a machine left behind like all the others, but deep inside, He knew better. He had seen something in those eyes that machines could not hold. He sat by the fire he built from old wiring and scrap fuel, the flames flickering blue and green, casting long ghostly shadows across the ruins around him. His mind wandered to the time before the wars, when his father had told stories of the Guardians, great spirits of power and balance that once walked beside mankind, keeping the world from falling into chaos. He had thought they were myths, bedtime tales meant to comfort a child growing up in a broken world, but now he was not so sure. As he stared into the flames, the wind began to change again, a low hum rising from the sand. The ground trembled slightly, and the air shimmered with heat, though there was no fire large enough to cause it. Cale stood, his heart pounding, and he saw it, the glow moving through the darkness. Not far from his shack, it was faint at first, like a ghost wandering between the wrecks, but then he heard it, that same deep growl that had first called to him. Days ago the beast had returned. It emerged from behind the skeleton of an old battle mech, its massive form illuminated by the flickering firelight. The metal parts of its body gleamed with new luster, its wounds nearly closed, and its red eye burned brighter than before. Cale felt both awe and fear, but he did not run. He took a slow step forward, speaking softly, saying he was glad it was alive, though the words sounded small against the vast silence of the desert. The beast tilted its head, watching him. Then it approached step by step, each one shaking the ground. Cale could feel the heat radiating from its body and see small sparks dancing along the seams. Where flesh met steel, it stopped just a few feet away, lowering its head to his level. He could feel its breath, hot and rhythmic, washing over him, and for a strange, timeless moment they simply stood there, man and creature, staring into one another, caught between trust and danger. Then, without warning, the air around them crackled. Blue light flared above their heads like lightning frozen in place. The machines scattered across the yard began to hum, their dead cores awakening one by one. Cale turned his gaze upward and saw shapes forming in the sky, vast outlines of something immense, shifting. Within the clouds, a presence ancient and powerful watching them, the war guardian whose name no one remembered. Cale fell to his knees, the light burning across the ground in symbols too complex for his mind to grasp. The beast roared, but not in fear. It was calling to the light, and the light answered, a deep voice rolling through the night, not through sound, but through the bones of the earth itself. And in that moment Cale understood that freeing the beast had not been an accident, it had been a summons. The light in the sky did not fade, it grew brighter, swirling like a storm of color and sound that had no source. Cale shielded his eyes, though the brilliance seemed to burn from within more than without. The beast stood beside him, its body outlined in fire that did not consume it. The desert winds rose into a spiral, lifting sand and fragments of metal into the air. The ground cracked and hummed with energy, like the heartbeat of something vast awakening. After a long slumber, Cale could not move. He felt the pulse in his chest matched the rhythm of the storm above. Every spark, every vibration seemed to flow through him. He reached out instinctively, and his hand brushed against the beast's armor, where flesh met machine. A line of red light spread from that point, crawling up his arm in patterns that twisted and branched like roots glowing beneath his skin. He gasped, but there was no pain, only a strange warmth and the deep echo of a voice he could not understand whispering through his mind like the wind through broken metal. The beast turned its head to him, watching in silence as if it knew this would happen. Cale looked down at his arm, the light spreading until it reached his shoulder, and then his heart, a single symbol, burned. There, pulsing like a living flame, he heard words forming inside his thoughts, not in language but in meaning. The guardian sees your heart, mechanic of men, the act of mercy has bound you, the mark is given, the path is chosen. Cale tried to speak, but his voice was gone, swallowed by the roar of the wind around him. He fell to his knees as the storm of light broke apart, scattering across the desert. The sky cleared, leaving behind only the moon, pale and trembling above the ruins. The mark on his arm continued to glow faintly, its warmth fading into a steady heartbeat. The beast let out a low sound, almost like a sigh, and lowered itself beside him, resting its massive head on the ground as if keeping watch for a long time. Cale sat there breathing the silence, his mind spinning between disbelief and awe. He remembered the old tales, the guardians who once walked with humanity, choosing champions in times of great need, but those were legends, not truths. Yet here he was, with proof burned into his skin and a creature beside him that should not exist. He wondered why him, why a simple mechanic who fixed broken things, instead of fighting wars. Perhaps it was because he had seen life where others saw waste, perhaps because he had chosen compassion over fear. As dawn began to rise, the first rays of light fell across the desert, turning the sand to gold. Kale stood slowly, his body weak but his spirit alive. The beast rose to stretching its limbs, the glow from its body now softer, calmer. They looked toward the horizon where the sun broke through, and for the first time, Kale felt that the world itself was watching, waiting for what he would do next. The mark still burned faintly on his arm, a promise and a warning. Boff, the morning came. With a silence that felt too deep, Kale walked across the scrapyard, feeling the mark on his arm throb like a quiet drum, each pulse reminding him that the world had shifted beneath his feet. The beast followed him, its steps soft but heavy, leaving deep impressions in the sand. They moved together through the ruins, as if searching for something neither could name. The wind had changed again, carrying the faint echo of engines far away, not the smooth hum of machines, but the jagged rhythm of war approaching. Kale stopped and looked toward the horizon, a thin line of smoke rising in the distance. He could see the shimmer of movement, metallic shapes cutting through the heat waves. Soldiers, maybe scavengers or something worse. The desert did not welcome travelers, and those who came rarely brought peace. He turned to the beast, its red eye glinting like a spark under the rising sun. It seemed to sense what was coming. To its tail flicked, its claws sinking into the ground, ready for whatever would arrive. By noon, the sound had grown louder, the sky trembling with the vibration of aircraft. Kale climbed the hull of a broken carrier to get a better view, and what he saw made his breath catch. A convoy of armored transports rolling across the plain, surrounded by drones, their lights flashing like cold stars. The banners painted on their sides were old symbols of the war corps, remnants of an army that should have died long ago. They were coming toward him as if drawn by something they could not see but could feel. The beast growled low, the sound deep and warning. Kale felt fear twist in his stomach. He knew they had come for him, or for what he carried. Now the mark burned hotter beneath his skin, a constant reminder that he was no longer invisible. He wanted to hide, but the desert offered no shelter, only the open sky and the endless sand. The convoy reached the outer edges of the scrapyard. Soldiers, spilling out weapons, raised their faces, hidden behind glass masks, raised his hands shouting that he meant no harm, but the words vanished in the wind. One of the soldiers fired a warning shot. It struck a piece of metal near his feet, sparks leaping into the air. The beast roared in response, the sound shaking the ground. The soldiers staggered and opened fire, bullets and plasma streaking through the air. The beast moved like lightning, its body a blur of muscle and metal claws, tearing through armor, its roar echoing across the dunes. Kale dropped behind the wreckage, his heart pounding as explosions lit the yard. Through the chaos, a light burst from the clouds above, blinding white and gold. Kale felt it before he saw it, a wave of energy rolling through the air. The same voice that had spoken in his mind now thundered across the battlefield. The Guardian had awakened, drawn by the violence and the mark. The soldiers fell to their knees, their weapons faltering. The beast stood defiant, its body outlined in radiant fire. The voice spoke again through the storm. Mechanic, you cannot run. The choice is made. Kale looked up as the light enveloped him, and the beast, the wind screaming around them, the world dissolving into brilliance and silence. All at once the war had found him, but so had destiny, and there was no turning back. The light swallowed everything. Kale could not see, could not breathe, only feel the vibration of power that shook his bones and filled his chest with heat. It was not pain, it was something greater, like standing inside a storm made of memory and thunder. The world stretched around him, not the desert anymore, but a vast space of color and movement, the sky shifting between gold and silver shapes, floating like fragments of dreams, broken and remade. He felt the mark on his arm blaze bright until it was no longer skin but light itself. The beast stood beside him, calm in the chaos, its fur rippling as if wind moved through it, though there was no air to move. The Guardian appeared then, not as a figure of flesh or machine, but as an immense outline of energy, towering and shapeless, its form flickering between armor and starlight, a presence older than war and stronger than silence. Kale could feel its gaze, though it had no eyes. Every thought, every heartbeat within him laid bare, as if the universe itself had turned to see him. The Guardian spoke not with sound, but with meaning, words that filled the space between moments. Mechanic of men, your hands break, and mend your heart chooses mercy where others choose power. Your act has torn the balance of the forgotten oath. The beast you freed was bound to me by chains. Forged in fear, now those chains are undone, and so the mark is given. The choice of the guardian cannot be unmade. Kale tried to answer, but no voice came, only the feeling of questions spilling from his mind. Why me? What do you want? What does this mean? The guardian's light rippled like waves across water, and the answers came not as language but as vision. He saw the wars that once consumed the world, the birth of beasts made from human ambition, the fall of cities under skies of fire. He saw the guardians turning away, retreating into the unseen, waiting for hearts uncorrupted to rise again. He saw himself small yet chosen, because compassion was rarer than power and mercy, more dangerous than hate. The beast lowered its head beside him, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. The guardian's light merged, with it flowing through its armor, through the living veins beneath the metal until its eye burned with gold instead of red. Kale watched in awe as the creature transformed its body, renewing itself as if reborn. The guardian's voice filled his mind once more, protector and maker. You are bound now to halves of a single purpose. The mark that burns in your flesh is the key. The world will test you, the war will rise again, and you must stand where others fall. Then the light began to fade, the colors collapsing into a single beam that struck Kale's chest. He gasped as the energy flowed through him and into the beast, binding them together by something unseen. The guardian's last words drifted like wind across the stars. Balance must be restored. Then all was silent, the world returning in a rush of sound and sand, the desert beneath his feet once more, the beast standing tall beside him, its eyes glowing with the same light that now pulsed softly within. Hiskal looked around the battlefield, empty now, except for the ruins and the endless horizon, and though fear still stirred in him, something stronger had taken root, resolve, and the knowledge that his life would never belong to himself again. The storm faded, leaving the air thick with silence and dust. Kale stood unsteady, his skin still glowing faintly where the mark pulsed. The desert stretched endlessly around him, a wasteland of broken metal and scorched sand, yet it felt different. Now, alive, aware, as if it too had felt the guardian's gaze. The beast beside him breathed slow and deep, its body trembling from the energy that had passed through it. Steam rose from the seams of its armor, and the faint golden light of its eye flickered softly, like a dying ember that refused to fade. Kale looked down at his hands. They shook not from fear but from something heavier, a realization that what had happened was real. His mind struggled to catch up to the moment, every thought circling back to the same truth. He was chosen not for power or destiny but for mercy, and yet mercy came with cost. He felt it in the burning weight of the mark on his arm, and in the connection that now hummed between him and the beast. He could feel its heartbeat inside his own, a rhythm of strength and sorrow bound together. The sun climbed higher, the heat wrapping around them in waves. Kale moved slowly, gathering what tools and scraps he could find from the wreckage. He did not know why, but some instinct told him to build, to mend as he always had. Perhaps it was the only way he knew to make sense of chaos. He worked through the day, patching the beast's armor, cleaning its wounds, sealing the gaps where flesh met steel. The creature stood still the entire time, its gaze fixed on him, unblinking, trusting. He realized then that it was not just bound to him by power, it had chosen him. Too, as night began to fall, Kale sat beside the beast, staring at the horizon where the last light of the sun melted into crimson shadows. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the faint sound of movement, faraway engines again. Maybe survivors, maybe hunters. The world would not leave them in peace, not now, not after the guardian had awakened. The thought brought a strange calm to him. He no longer felt like the same man who once hid among broken machines, fixing the relics of war. He was part of something larger, something that would either save or destroy. He turned to the beast and placed his hand on its metal flank. The mark flared at his touch, and for a moment he saw flashes inside his mind, memories that were not his, a field of stars, a burning city, the screams of soldiers, the cries of victory and loss, the beast's past and its pain flooding through him. He gasped but did not pull away. He let it in, the grief, the rage, the hope. When the vision faded, his hand still rested against its armor, and the creature bowed its head low as if in gratitude. The night deepened, stars scattering like shards of glass across the sky. Kale lay back against the sand, exhausted yet awake. He felt the earth hum beneath him, a deep vibration. The world stirring, the war rising somewhere far away, and he understood the guardian's words. Balance must be restored. He did not know how, but he knew he would not run. He had freed a beast, and in doing so freed himself from the silence of the past, and now both would face what was coming together. The dawn came quietly, the sky painted in streaks of gold, and gray Kale woke to the soft rumble of the beast beside him, its breath. Slow, its gaze turned toward the horizon where the first light cut across the dunes. He rose, feeling the stiffness in his limbs and the warmth of the mark beneath his skin. It pulsed in rhythm with the morning like a heartbeat of the earth itself. He looked around the desert, vast and endless, yet no longer empty. It hummed with faint vibrations, distant echoes of engines and thunder. The world was waking and war was coming. Kale gathered what he could: tools, water, bits of scavenged metal. He strapped them to his belt without thinking, his body moved by instinct. His mind focused only on one truth: he could not stay. The Guardian had chosen him not to hide, but to act. The beast watched him as he worked, its eyes glowing faintly gold. When he spoke, it tilted its head as though listening, though he knew it understood more than words can tell. He told it that they would have to move, that somewhere beyond the dunes something waited, perhaps others like them, or perhaps the end of all things. Either way, they had to face it together. The wind rose, carrying dust and the scent of ozone. Kale felt it before he saw it, the tremor beneath his feet, the low drone of machines rising from the horizon, shadows moving through the heat waves. More soldiers, or maybe something worse, machines without men, drones left from the old wars, still following orders that no longer mattered. They came in waves, silver and black, cutting across the sand, their weapons gleaming under the rising sun. Kale stood still, the beast beside him, motionless, waiting. The mark on his arm flared brighter, answering the light in the beast's eyes. When the first drone fired, Kale did not flinch. The beast roared, a sound that split the sky. The energy within its body burst outward, forming a barrier of golden fire that shattered the incoming rounds. Kale felt the power flow through him, the connection between them alive, like lightning. He raised his hand, and the ground beneath the drones trembled, ancient wrecks stirring as if his will alone commanded them. The machines of the past rose, half-buried mechs lifting their heads, eyes glowing once more, not with rage but with purpose. The desert had remembered. The battle was brief, the sandstorm of light and metal swallowing the drones until nothing moved but the wind. Kale stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, the mark fading back to a dim glow. The beast lowered its head beside him, its body steaming. The silence returned, heavier but full of meaning. He looked to the horizon and saw new lights in the distance. Not enemies this time, but signals, faint and rhythmic, a call from something beyond, perhaps other guardians, perhaps other chosen. The path was no longer clear, but the fear was gone. Kale placed his hand on the beast's flank and felt the pulse of life beneath the steel. Together they turned toward the rising sun, their shadows stretching long across the sand, the world behind them broken, but the world ahead waiting. He was no longer just a mechanic, and the beast no longer just a weapon. They were both something reborn, the man who freed the beast and the beast who freed the man, bound by the will of the war guardian, walking toward whatever destiny awaited in the burning dawn of a world beginning again. Asterisk.